young as they used to be, but 50 long years in Ireton, wonderful years actually in Ireton, to my credit, and it was pretty early on in the days of the town. In fact, my husband and I moved here in 1884. The town was about 2 years old. It was pretty much just a wide place on the road. There were some business places along Main Street, and stretching up the hill from the depot on both sides, actually. It really grew quite fast. There weren't as many people, there weren't as many houses, and many of the business people lived in their place of business, behind the store or above the store, including my husband's blacksmith shop. Not exactly an ideal place to live or raise a family. Pretty much a dangerous place for fire and all, and actually several blacksmith shops did burn down in Ireton, and so before long the council decreed they couldn't have a blacksmith shop within the business district. It had to be moved out someplace else, which was pretty good common sense. But backtracking just a little, I was born in Indiana. My parents moved when I was quite small to Audubon, Iowa, and that's where I met and married the man who many people knew as Dan. To me, he was Daniel Reed Stewart. He was not quite as tall as Levi Black, but he also was a very distinguished, erect figure with quite a shock of white hair. Didn't take him long to gray. I hope that wasn't due entirely to me. He also had been born in Canada on Prince Edward Island. If any of you are acquainted with the Anne of Green Gables stories, that was her home territory. He was trained to be a carriage maker. He was intending to be a carriage maker for the royal family, for the carriages and the things that dignitaries would use when they were visiting Canada. But he decided that it was much more lucrative down here in the States, so he came down to Audubon. And he was farming. He was just a young man at the time, doing whatever he could to make money. I caught his eye, or he caught my eye. We're not quite sure which it was. We were married there, and we had our daughter, Alberta, who was known as Birdie. And in a matter of about 2 years' time, Dan could see by the amount of people moving through Audubon and through that part of the state that there was a lot of settlement going up in northwest Iowa. And he was quite sure there would be a big need for blacksmiths. So in addition to being a carriage maker, a carpenter, he taught himself to be a blacksmith. We came to Ireton, Iowa, and Daniel, with a good eye for business, bought this whole block, pretty much. His place of business was on Main Street, on the east side, where the locker is now. He also built a building next to that, which I had for a restaurant. And we lived in quite a small house for just a short time, but before long, we built a very fine house, the finest house actually in Ireton, except for possibly the Kluter house out on the north side of town. And it was right where we are now. This was the spot where the Stewart house was built. It was an elegant house. It was built in the English style because that's the way I was raised. It was important to me to have a carpet, to have nice furniture, to have a tea during the day, to eat off of good china, to dress in my best clothes for special occasions, to teach manners to my children and to demand them from everybody else around me. And although my given name was Alice, I'm not quite sure how it happened, but pretty much all the time I lived here, I was known as Biddie. I'll let you draw your own conclusions from it. We were staunch Presbyterians. We were involved in everything that was going on in what was the old Union Presbyterian Church. Those of you who are a little more mature might remember a kind of a tumble-down old building that served as an implement building across from where the fire station is now. That was the first Presbyterian church in town, called the United Presbyterian. Ironically, it was not at all united. It soon split, and they formed another church and named it the First Presbyterian Church. Go figure. Anyhow, we had an active social life, an active church life, but we only had the one little child. And being the restless sort, I soon opened a restaurant because there was a need for that as well. And had a tea shop next to it where the ladies could come and sip their tea and exchange their news and feel like maybe we were a little bit more in the mainstream instead of out in the middle of the prairie. Pretty much the middle of nowhere in those days. My husband was a council member before long, involved in a lot of the things that were going on, and he and all the other men in town periodically would load their wagons with their utensils and head for the Floyd River to the east, or the Rock or the Sioux to the west, dig out saplings and bring them back so that there would be some trees in the town of Ireton. Because of course there were none. Initially it was just prairie land, and there were hardly ever any trees in prairie land because there would be a prairie fire and it would sweep across the country and everything would burn unless there happened to be a water source close by. So if there was a slough or a creek or a river, you could probably find some volunteer trees growing in those places. And that was the source for all the groves and the farms around, and for the town of Ireton as well. It was a rare family that could afford to go off and buy some stock someplace from, I think Gurney's was the first one around here, but there were places to buy it, but that took money, and people didn't have a lot of money. It was a prosperous little town. We had, we thought, a wonderful life here. We did have a few little problems. For one, we always wanted a bigger family, but all the child we had was our Birdie, Alberta. It was always called Birdie, and that was a bit confusing because in the same household we had Birdie and Biddie. But of course nobody called me that to my name, to my face. I don't know what they called me to my face. They probably just scurried away. That's the reputation that I had, unfortunately.